Welcome to Tanakh Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live from Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Torah Talk Weekly Parsha with our good friend, Rabbi Rafi Mollot. Welcome back, my dear friend. How are you today?
Doing well. The sound was a little overwhelming for me.
Was it too loud?
I was just coming through very strong, and
gotcha.
I felt a little overpowered if I was going to say anything.
I see. Hopefully the viewers weren't experiencing the same thing. If you did, my apologies. So, okay, cool. So, all right. Well, we are moving right along. So, Parshat Lech Lecha. Last week was Noach, and before that was Bereshis, and the whole beginning series is just like a fascinating run, so it's pretty awesome. Looking forward to today's Parsha. So, once again, welcome back, and really, really grateful for your time. The thing that a lot of people don't realize this, but you not only are, let me mute my phone, sorry about that. You not only are the primary contact for the weekly Parsha, but what a lot of people aren't aware of is that whenever we do have a replacement, it's because you have found one for us, and they're friends and colleagues of yours somewhere down the line, and everybody seems to like the whole trilogy so far. So, just again, want to say thank you for doing your absolute best to make sure we've got somebody to do this, even though it's not your responsibility. But we really do appreciate you doing that for sure. So
yeah, my pleasure, my honor. A trilogy is okay as long as it's not a trinity, right?
Trilogy. Yeah, I kind of avoided that trinity thing. Yeah.
A triad, perhaps. A triad.
There we go. Nice.
Okay, Lech Lecha. So there's so much to say about the Parsha of Lech Lecha. We ended off, actually, the Parsha of Noach. We begin to hear already about the person called Avram. He's not yet called Avraham or Abraham. He's called Avram. Abram, however you would pronounce that in English. We start to hear about him at the end of Parshas Noach. We hear the descendants of those who emerged from the ark, 10 generations from Noah till Abraham, but he's not yet Abraham, he's Avram. And we hear about Terach and his father, and we hear about Abraham's brothers and the death of his brother Haran, and that his brother has these 3 children. He has 2 daughters and a son, and Avram and his brothers, 3 brothers: Haran, Avram, and Nahor. So when Haran dies, and the text doesn't reveal to us how he dies, although we do have an oral tradition regarding how he dies, whether or not we go into that story, we'll see as we go.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
And you don't have to. You may not even be able to answer it, but even if you can, you don't have to answer it here because this might not be the right format for it. But one thing that when I was a Messianic Christian, like after I left Christianity in general, went to Messianic Christianity, one thing that they pushed a lot was they really harped heavily on somewhere in the New Testament where it says there was 10 generations from Abraham to whatever, all these, and then they calculated Jesus in there. But from what I'm understanding, they're missing, or they added a person or took some person out. Is there any? Have you heard or have you taught anything counter missionary wise about that? Do you have any comments on that? If you do, just feed them in if you can along the way.
I'm not familiar with that at all. Are
Okay.
you saying that in the New Testament it says that there's 10 generations from Abraham?
Let me see.
Until, again, from who to who? What did it say?
Well, they basically try to fit Jesus in the 10, like the 10, 10, 10. From don't get me to mess it all up. But from Noah to Abraham, and then from Abraham to King David to Jesus, whatever, something like that. That was what they were doing. They were trying to show you how perfect it was by numbers that Jesus fit the timing of when Mashiach was coming and stuff. But from what I understand, they actually removed a name or two to make that math work. But I didn't know if you had heard anything about that.
So I'll outsource you for this one.
Okay.
Because I do recall hearing Rabbi Tovia Singer speak about this in his series that is connected to the Let's Get Biblical books. everyone knows there's an audio series that's free for download.
Right.
I think they're free for download from his website, outreachtorah.org, if I'm not correct. Outreach Judaism, rather. Outreachjudaism.org. I think you could download it there for free. If not, you could for sure download it from a website called Easy to Remember. And I'll give a plug here because this is a great website for all of your listeners, really. There's a website called easytoremember.com. Okay. Oh, wow. And the web address is quite easy to remember. I think it was a brilliant move to name it that. It's called easytoremember.com. And on easytoremember.com are many, many downloadable classes from some of the top speakers and thinkers in the Jewish world today. Included on that list is Rabbi Singer. But what's funny is this: you could on the front page there's like a tab that says audio and video or something like that. So you can go to that tab, and in the audio section there'll be names of different presenters, and you click on their name, and it'll have a list of their classes, dozens and dozens and dozens. Nice. Many hours of excellent content. Well, here's what's funny about it is that it goes like Rabbi David Orlovsky, Rabbi Akiva Tatz, Rabbi David Gottlieb, Rabbi Ephraim Waxman, whoever it is, and then the last one on the list says anti-missionary MP3s. That's just what it's called. Wow. Anti-missionary MP3s. Nice. And you click on anti-missionary MP3s, and it's Rabbi Tovia Singer's Let's Get Biblical audio series. That's awesome. I don't know why they didn't title it Rabbi Tovia Singer, except, ironically, I think Tovia Singer is more well known by non-Jews than he is by Jews, because since his entire mission is to do outreach to Jews who are involved with the church, the people who are most exposed to Rabbi Singer's content are not those within the fold of the traditional Orthodox community. So if they would have put Rabbi Tovia Singer, I think a lot of people would have been scratching their heads and be like, who's that? I don't recognize that name as like one of the big speakers in the Jewish world. Right. And so it says anti-missionary MP3s, because if you want to get some content that'll help you as a traditional Jew combat missionary arguments, here's where you get them. You click on that, and it's Rabbi Tovia Singer's audio series. Anyway, you can definitely download it there. In that series, I don't remember which segment of the series it is. Maybe it's titled something to do with genealogies. I don't remember. But there is a lecture where he talks about the genealogies in Matthew, and I guess, where's the other genealogy? Luke?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
And he talks about the 14-14-14, as I recall.
That's what it was.
Picture.
Yeah. And not 10. Yeah.
Between this one and this one. Then there's 14 generations between this one and this one. And then there's 14 generations between, let's say, King David and Jesus. Drawing that number.
That is exactly what I was thinking of. Is the 14s, not the 10s.
Sorry, well, go ahead.
That is what I was thinking about. Was the 14s, not the 10s. Now, on the flip side of that coin, on the 10 part, from the 10 generations from Adam to Noah, Christians use the names. Every name has a meaning, and they say that the name of the 10 people from 10 generations from Adam to Noah, that it spells out the story of Jesus and the resurrection, which I find quite entertaining, because we've done a show or two on it. But anyway, I might have conflated two stories together, so which is probably why you didn't recognize what I was saying. So anyway,
so the second thing you said, I don't think I've ever heard.
Okay.
Again, not like I want to spend my time on this, but like, in order to respond to it, I would have to look at it and be like, actually take a look at it and see what is or isn't there. But I can't really respond. But the 14-14, he said the significance of 14, and I guess this is true, meaning I can do the math and tell you this is correct. And Rabbi Singer is saying this was the intent of the authors of the New Testament, is that David, in Hebrew, David, has the numerical value of 14. And that's correct. So the idea of the 14 generations is to show something messianic, something that is related to King David. So 14, 14, 14, and that points to Jesus as the Messiah. But there, Rabbi Singer goes and he picks apart this argument quite thoroughly, as he does with all of them. So rather than me spend time on it, I would outsource you to Rabbi Singer's counter argument on that.
Thank you, and I apologize for derailing the direction we were headed.
No, okay, no problem. So what I was saying is that we hear about Abraham's family, and so Abraham has these two brothers. One of them dies, the Torah tells us, and he leaves behind 3 children. They're called Yiscah, Milcah, or the 2 daughters, Yiscah and Milcah, and a son named Lot. In English, they say Lot, L-O-T, Lot. And Abraham, it says Nahor marries Milcah, and Abraham marries Sarai. Now, our rabbis tell us that Sarai and Yiscah were the same individual, that, in fact, the name means the same thing. Yiscah is like the word Nisicha, which means a princess, and Sarai, who will later be she'll be changed to Sarah. Sarai is like the word Sar, which means a noble person, an officer, someone who's in a position of leadership, command, nobility. So that's the same idea of a princess. That Sarah, the name Sarah, actually means princess. So Yiscah and Sarai are 2 synonymous names for the same individual, and it works out that each of the brothers marries one of the 2 daughters of Haran, and Lot, who's Avram's nephew, is now the brother-in-law as well. And we hear actually at the end of Noach that Terach, it says, leaves Ur Kasdim. Very, very interesting passage. A very mysterious passage that's given far too little attention. It says that Terach leaves Ur Kasdim, which is translated as like Ur, you are, Ur of the Chaldeans in Babylonia, which is pretty much correct. And he says he leaves and he takes with him Abraham and Nahor and their wives and Lot, and he takes them to travel to the land of Canaan. Did you ever notice that? That Terach takes his sons and their wives out of Ur Kasdim. It says to go to the land of Canaan. Did you ever notice that before?
Mm-mm. Yep.
I don't know if your listeners ever picked up on that. What? Terach, the father of Avram,
right,
was traveling to the land of Canaan? Why was he doing that? What was his impetus to do so? It does not tell us. We know in this week's Parsha begins with God said to Avram, Lech Lecha, go for yourself, leave your father's house, leave the place of your birth, leave your home, the house of your father, etc., and go to the land that I will show you. He doesn't even tell him what land that is. Go to the land I will show you. And Avram has to go on faith, trusting God to bring him to the right place in an uncertain world where there was no GPS and there was no communication. And to go on the roads was a very dangerous, difficult, turbulent, arduous task, not knowing where he's going, no friends, no family, no, obviously he took what provisions he need, and he took his immediate family with him. And it says he even says they took the souls that they made in Haran. The question is, what does it mean to make a soul? It's another question. And, he had to just follow God. Didn't even tell him where he was going. Turns out it was the same place his father was taking him. But even his father didn't get that far. The Torah tells us in the Parsha of Noach that Terach takes his family to travel to Canaan, and he gets as far as a place called Haran, and he stops in the land of Haran, and he dies there. Now in our Parsha, continuing, we hear, okay, Avram, leave your father's home, leave your country, leave your birthplace. And what do you mean his birthplace? He came to Haran from Ur Kasdim. Isn't Ur Kasdim his birthplace? These are very mysterious verses. And go to the land, I'll show you, ends up being Canaan anyway. And Avram says, it's funny, I think my father was going to take me here. Why? Why was his father on the way to Canaan? Now, tradition tells us that his father was something of a notorious idolater. In fact, that he crafted idols. He was, I guess, maybe some type of a sculptor. He made statues, and he sold them it was his business, was selling statues to worshipers. He was very much a promoter of idolatry. That was his livelihood. And there's the famous story of Avram the iconoclast, that he smashes his father's idols, and he, when his father is absent, and he puts the hammer into the arms of one of the large statues. And when his father returns and he sees all of the statues that he made destroyed, he asks Avram, what happened? And Avram said, well, this woman came in with an offering, and all the idols started fighting over who should get the offering. This one said, I should get it. This one said, I should get it. Finally, the big guy over there, he got frustrated with the rest of them. He picked up a hammer and he smashed all of them. And that's why, and he puts in front of the idol the woman's offering. The woman did come in with an offering, but the rest Avram made up. And he puts the tray in front of the big idol. And Terach's like tearing his hair out. And he's like, Avram, what are you talking about? The idols got in an argument. This one got up and smashed the other ones. Idols don't talk. Idols don't move. And then Avram turns to his father and he says, Father, let your ears hear what your mouth is saying. If idols can't talk, if idols can't move, why do you worship them? Why do you worship them? Now, the follow-up of the story is that Avram is essentially arrested for, sedition, whatever you would call blasphemy against the gods. He's sentenced to death. There's a whole story revolving, and as a matter of fact, we're told this is how Haran died, is that Haran was influenced by Avram's ideology. We should talk a little bit about the biography of Avram that comes to us, not from the Torah, because the verses of Avram are so sparse until he's 75 years old. We hear God say, leave your home and go to this land I will show you. And the Torah says Avram was 75 years old when he left Haran. Everything until he was 75 we don't hear. But then suddenly we meet this remarkable person. He's a monotheist in a world of idolaters. He's one man against the world. Where did he come from? How did he get this way? There's obviously more to the story. So we do find clues in the text. There are clues in the text that are expounded by the sages and expanded upon. And the details that come down to us are essentially, there are many. And I don't know how much time I want to spend during the hour on just this story. But I think the main ideas is that Avram, from a young age, was very bright, sharp, intelligent, and he was examining the world. And he saw, like many people saw, maybe there was this hierarchy of power. And while people assigned individual independent powers to each one of these forces of nature, Avram began to see the harmony. He began to see that it all works like a well-oiled machine, and that each part is like a cog, and without it, the machine wouldn't function. So rather than seeing opposing entities, my God is stronger than your God, wars between gods, wars between peoples who have patron gods, he said, these are not separate gods. These are powers under the control of some great architect of this whole universe that we see. And he created everything, and he's controlling everything. There has to be one unifying power behind everything that we see. And he created this heresy of monotheism. Now, truthfully, he didn't really create it, because obviously it existed from the time of Adam and ultimately Noah and Noah's sons. But for the most part, that tradition was lost. And Maimonides says that initially the way that idolatry arose is that people began honoring the forces of nature by saying, God has put such power into these elements of nature. If God invested such power in them, isn't it an honor to God if we would honor these powers? And while not worshiping them, they did create kind of maybe shrines or some type of a service of obeisance that was really intended to honor God by honoring his creations. But as the generations passed, people began to focus more on what they could see than an invisible God that was beyond it all. And they saw the honor that was surrounding these icons, and they began assigning them individual power and individual personalities. And at first they recognized there was a Hashem, but there's also other powers. And so they created what's called in Hebrew shituf. It's kind of like a partnering of God as kind of like the chief power together with lower powers that perhaps he created, but they have their own autonomy. And slowly over more generations, people totally stopped regarding Hashem and totally focused on these smaller powers until Hashem was completely forgotten and only the idols now existed. Though there were still those who kept the initial tradition of Noah, namely his son Shem, who Avram was descended from, and Shem was alive at the time of Avram. We're even told that Malki Tzedek, who appears in chapter 14, is the same person as Shem, the same individual as Shem. That's our tradition in the matter. It says he was Kohen El Elyon. He was priest of the Most High God. That is Hashem. So this individual was actually a priest of God. So what religion is that? What religion serves Hashem? What we would call today Noahidism, right? But because of what, there was no Judaism yet. But whatever it was called then, right? He was the priest of it. He was the chief religious figure here. And Shem, the son of Noah, who was righteous, he was blessed by God. It says that God would dwell in the tents of Shem. So who else is this Malki Tzedek person other than Shem? That's essentially the view of the tradition. Malki Tzedek wasn't a proper name. It was a title. And it even says that Avram, offered tithes to Malki Tzedek, the Kohen of the Most High God. The Kohen, the priest to Hashem, is called the Kohen, and Abram offers him tithes, like the Torah would later command the Jewish people to offer to the Levites tithes and portions to the Kohanim, the priests. So this person is regarded as a righteous individual leading some type of service of Hashem. We understand this was Shem. So Avram wasn't the only guy, but for the most part, this ideology had been obscured. Certainly in the place where Abraham grew up, and not only did he discover it on his own, but he really innovated two innovations over that of what we'll call Noahidism. Innovation number one was outreach. We know that, Rabbi Komarnik gave a great class last week. Noah is criticized to a certain degree for responsibility for the flood. That even though he was righteous, the flood waters are still called Mei Noach, the waters of Noah. Why are they the waters of Noah? The waters of Noah because he had 120 years to warn people, and however it is, he didn't get the message across. Now, was he trying? Was he not trying hard enough? Was his message not delivered in a palatable way that people could receive? It's unclear. We don't have those details. But he seems to be criticized for falling short of his responsibility to stop the flood from happening. The purpose of the ark was, if anything, a warning that people should change their ways. And as Rabbi Komarnik mentioned, the flood could have been stopped. It was not inevitable. There's a lot of evidence to that in the verses, aside from giving 120 years till the flood would happen. But then it says 7 more days, at the 7th day, whatever, there were 7 more days granted, and so on. So, and then it started raining gently in the beginning, not hard, that people should have time to absorb, no pun intended, the message from God that there's something coming down the pike, and this can be turned around. And Noah failed in that. So the innovation of Abraham was, number one, to do, let's say, an improved form of outreach to the point that we're told, okay, I'm getting a little too far ahead. I'm getting a little too far ahead of the story. But Avram discovers as a young person that there is one God, and he creates this rebellion against a heresy, if you will, a blasphemy against the idolatry, and he's almost executed for it. He even influences his brother Haran to believe like he believes. And so they're both taken in front of the despot of the time, which is Nimrod, this fellow we hear about also in Parshas Noach, one of the descendants of Ham, and Nimrod puts him to the test. The story is found in the rabbinic tradition that he says, you'll worship idols or you'll be thrown into the fire. And that's, by the way, the meaning of Ur Kastim. Ur, the word Ur, means a fire. And Ur is a fire, like the word or, a light. The same letters spell Ur, which means, rather than a light, it means a fire. You have a light, Ur. The fire of the Chaldeans. There was a furnace in Chaldea, and some say this was the furnace where in Parshat Noach it says that they baked bricks in a furnace. They baked bricks to build the Tower of Babel, which was also, to a certain degree, to assert the majesty of man over the majesty of God. And so there was this great furnace in Chaldea, Ur Kasdim. And that's why later in the covenant between the parts in chapter 15, when God makes a covenant with Abraham and he cuts the animals in two halves and he walks between the parts. So God says, very, very similar to the revelation at Sinai. It's very striking. At Sinai, God says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God, Asher hotzeisicha me'eretz Mitzrayim, who took you out of the land of Egypt. And God says in chapter 15 of Genesis, in the covenant between the parts with Abraham, he says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God, Asher hotzeisicha me'ur kastim, who took you out of Ur Kasdim. And then those who say that mean, I took you out of the fire. I took you out of the furnace of the Chaldeans. This is what I mean when I say these details are hinted in the text, in that we're told that Avram refused to serve idols, even upon pain of death, and he was tossed into the furnace, and he survived. God miraculously saved him from burning in the furnace. Some of the details in the tradition tell us he was left in the furnace for 3 days, and he emerged unscathed. Now, after Avram survives the furnace, they turn to Haran and they say, what about you? Do you choose to die or to serve idols? And he looks, and Rashi, the famous commentator who quotes this story from the Midrash, he says that Haran said, I want to see what happens with my brother. If he dies, I'll worship the idol. If he lives, I'll worship God. So when he sees Avram emerge with a miracle, he says, do your worst. I'm with Avram. They tossed him in, and sadly he burned to death. And the understanding of that is his faith was not pure like that of Avram. Avram, again, whether he knew he was going to be saved or not, but he said, I'm ready to die for my God. I'm ready to die for my belief. I'm ready to die for the truth, And Haran was not ready to die for the truth. He said, if he survives, I'll go in. So he could have just said, I'll worship the idol and be saved either way. We have to give him the credit that he said, I will stick with the ideology of my brother if he survives. So that kind of a wishy-washy thing, not that, again, I'm sure he was very meritorious, but it's not necessarily going to merit a supernatural act for some belief that isn't whole. So Avram, the point is that Avram was influential. Avram was able to influence many people, and it says that his father took him from Ur Kasdim and brought him to Haran. It seems that he influenced his father. Listen, this is my understanding here. Because I told you there's the mystery of why does his father take his family to Canaan? He attempts to. He doesn't make it that far. But it says he takes them out of Ur Kasdim to go to Canaan. Why Canaan? No answer given. It seems that Avram did convince his father. Let your ears hear what your mouth is saying. He convinced his father. He convinced his brother. His brother died. His father maybe wasn't so vocal about his opinions, but he said, listen, we got to get out of this place. We have to go somewhere where we're not going to be persecuted for these beliefs. And however the knowledge came to him, maybe, I'm just saying maybe, I don't know. He knew there was this guy, Malki Tzedek, in Yerushalayim, a place called Shalem. Shalem is the same as Yerushalayim, Jerusalem. He says, let's go to his place because there we'll be safe. And so he takes Avram and his family and he travels. Maybe the road was too difficult for him because he was an old man. We don't know why he stopped. But we do know that he stopped in a place called Haran and he set his roots there, and that's where the rest of the family of Avram will develop. And later, when Avram is in Canaan and he wants to find a wife for his son, he'll send his servants back there to bring a wife from his family. His family are going to stay there. But God commands in our Parsha, now Avram is now 75 years old. He's been through a lot. He says, go, and Avram goes, and it says when they went, he goes together with his wife, his nephew Lot. It says they take all their possessions, and this word it says, "Ve'es hanefesh asher asu v'charan." And this is in chapter 12, maybe around verse 4, give or take. Not looking at it right now. He says, and they took the souls that they made in Haran. Now, I don't know what the English translates over there. I'm just telling you what the Hebrew literally translates to. Ve'es hanefesh asher asu v'charan. And the soul, it's singular, but nefesh is also plural. And the soul or souls, and it's souls that they made in Haran. What does it mean they made souls in Haran? Any thoughts, William? Many people may know this because it's somewhat famous.
I'm sorry. I'm here. I had to turn my mic on. Honestly, I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer to that. Other than just, when you have a baby, you kind of created something. So maybe.
Right. Well, we know they were barren. We know they were childless. So the souls that they made are not their children. So Rashi, the famous commentator, he offers two explanations. And they're probably both true. Meaning that they're probably simultaneously true, which emerges from verses later on as well. The souls they made could mean the souls that they acquired. Because in Hebrew, the word to acquire also means to create. As we see in this week's Parsha, when Melchizedek praises God, he says, Baruch El Elyon, blessed is the Most High God. He says, Konei shamayim va'aretz. Konei means the one who acquires. The one who acquires the heaven and earth. So what does it mean he acquires the heaven and earth? So I'm just telling you that there in that context, the word which normally means acquire in that context means to create. And it's interesting, it's very John Lockean. Anyone who knows John Locke and his philosophy, he says that ownership is when one adds their work to the land, that the property is when one adds their work to a thing, it becomes their property. So it seems that actually is based in the biblical Hebrew, that the word for acquisition also means to create. When you create something, you acquire it because by virtue of creating it, it's yours. So creation and acquisition are the same verb in Hebrew sometimes. So when we have Konei Shamayim Va'aretz, God is called the one who acquires the heaven and earth, meaning creates the heaven and earth. Here, Rashi interprets this verse, they made souls means they acquired souls. And that is that they owned a lot of servants. Back in those days, that's the way it went. And we could go on a whole long tangent about slavery according to the Torah. It's a very dirty word, slavery. However, the Torah's guidelines for what we would call slavery are in no way comparable to what slavery has been historically in the world, and that's why it's almost unfortunate that the same word is used for both. It's more like indentured servitude. It's not an advocated practice, and in fact, the Torah commands us at a certain point to release our slaves. But again, I put slaves in quotation mark. The servant has to be treated extremely humanely, and the owner is responsible to treat his servant with so much respect that, and there are many details to go into, that our rabbis actually say one who acquires a servant has acquired a master for himself, because the master is responsible for the well-being of the servant. It's just another responsibility that it's such a heavy responsibility that the master must care for his servant. It's almost not worth the acquisition because your obligations to the servant are very, very great. So just putting that aside, Avram and Sarah, they had many servants that they acquired literally. However, Rashi says the making of souls here could mean the changing of people's lives on a spiritual level. The, so to speak, conversion of people spiritually from those who worship a false God to those who worship a true God. To make that transformation, which is the transformation of the soul, the truest essence of a human being is not his body that's here for however many years and will crumble into dust from whence it came, but rather the eternity of the soul. And for the soul to be eternal, it has to attach itself to that which is eternal. A soul which is attached to idolatry is a dead soul. Our rabbis tell us that the wicked are called dead even while they're alive. They're the walking dead. The wicked are the walking dead. And the righteous are called living even after they die, because their afterlife is eternally forever connected to God. So to give someone a connection to the one true God, Hashem, is to give them life itself. As HaNefesh Asher Asu, the souls that they made in Haran, they gave these people life because they taught them the truth about God, and they, so to speak, converted them to the belief in God. So, number one innovation of Avram over that of his predecessors, who may have been Noahide in their following, and there were very few in the world at that time, is number one, effective outreach. Effective outreach. We don't find that the Noahides were going out and trying to change the world. They kept to themselves. They did their service of God in solitude, and for what it was worth, that was acceptable for them. But Avram went above and beyond. That was innovation number one. Innovation number two is that Avram looked at the world and intuited from the world the will of God, such that it says he was able to look at the dog and learn loyalty. He was able to look at the cat and learn modesty. If anyone, I have a dog and a cat. Spoiler alert: we have all animal rescues in our house. So we rescued a dog. It's an incredible story. I am the last guy. I have to go on this tangent. I am the last guy on earth to own a dog. I just have to say. I'm not going to go into why, but I'm the last. First of all, I have to say I used to be allergic to dogs and cats. I was the last guy in the world who wanted a dog. I'm not going to go into why, but when we moved to Seattle, we're in Houston today, but when we lived in Seattle, owning a dog in Seattle was very popular. Dogs were very popular in Seattle, and people had every family had like multiple dogs. Everyone had at least one dog, maybe two, maybe more. And, one of the things, my kids love animals. We're animal lovers. We are. I actually raised 6 hens in my backyard in Seattle. We're animal lovers. But I didn't want an animal living in my house with me. The chickens in the backyard, I said, that's fine. My ancestors did it. I could do it. But living with dogs and cats in the house, I just felt there has to be a demarcation. I'm not putting anyone down. That's my own personal feeling. There has to be a demarcation between humans and animals. This is where I live. That's where you live. You live outside. I live inside. This is my house, not your house. That's just the way I felt about it. But we love animals. We would go to farms. We would go to zoos. We would go, animals are fun. And just keep them out of my house, please. With that said, we had guinea pigs. They were in a cage. I said, they're in a cage. That's their place. We had fish. They're in a bowl. That's their place. No one gets to wander around the house except for the humans. Okay. So, so my kids, they saw dogs. They love dogs. They wanted, can we get a dog? Can we get it? For years and years, begging, crying, can we have a dog? No. And so I used to actually take my kids to dog parks. We would go to the dog parks so my kids could see and play with dogs. And the dogs would go swimming in the river, and my kids would go swimming with the dogs in the river. This is how we got our kicks without owning a pet. Anyway, we moved to Houston, and some things happened. Long story short, somebody puts in a WhatsApp group, we found this dog and it needs a home, and my wife's looking at it. My kids want a dog, and she's looking at this beautiful dog. And she's looking at me and everyone with the puppy dog eyes, and they're like, Daddy, what do you say? And I was like, I don't want to say anything at all. I'm just not going to say anything at all. If you choose to get the dog, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not saying yes, I'm not saying no. Long story short, We have a dog. Now, what was the story of this dog? I run into this guy. I'm walking around, and I see this guy. He's walking his dog. And, I'm polite. Say, hello, how are you? And he says, are you the guy whose daughter I see walking with a husky? And I say, yeah, that's me. He goes, do you know I saved that dog? I know that dog. And I was like, what happened? He says, I walk out of my house, and this dog is bleeding to death on the sidewalk in front of my house. Now, apparently the dog gave birth to like stillborn puppies, and it was a sickly, stray dog. There was a forest near our neighborhood that was cut down to build houses. There were a lot of stray animals living in the forest. They became homeless. This dog starts wandering around our neighborhood. It gives birth to stillborns. It's like sickly, dying. It's like laying on the sidewalk dying. And so this fellow who sees this dog, he saves the dog. However, he's a dog owner. He finds a way to save the dog, but he knows he needs to find the dog an owner. And he's like, what am I going to do with this dog? How am I going to find this dog an owner? He tells me this. He says, I got on my knees before the Lord. And I said, Lord, please help me find the right owner for this dog. He said, the second I saw you, I knew you were the right guy. I don't know how he knew. He said, the minute I saw you, I said, I knew you were the person, right? So somehow, like he said, I saw you, and I was like, are you the one whose daughter is walking the dog? How should he know that, right? So I was like, yeah. He goes, I knew it. When I saw you, I knew you were the one. I prayed to God that he should find the right owner. When I saw you, I knew you were the guy. It's a crazy story, right? And I'm sitting there thinking, I was like, never in my life did I want a dog. How did I get soft on this dog? How did I get soft? And you see the power of prayer. You see, there's not a Jew, this guy. You see the power of prayer. The power of prayer. It's a true story. I have a dog. Suddenly, I'll tell you a little bit more. One day, in the garage in my house, someone in my family hears a strange sound, and it's coming from the wall. And it sounds like this. Meow. 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 Like that. And we're listening to this, and we're like, there's a cat in the wall. How is there a cat in the wall? So we call the landlord. I rent my house. And he comes, and he smashes the wall open, and there's a kitten in the wall. We're like, how does a kitten get into the wall? So one day, I see there's a stray cat hanging around outside my house, and I'm watching it, and I see it climbs up the wall of my house, and it ducks into a little crack in the roof. And I'm like, that cat laid kittens in my attic. So I tell the landlord said, there's a crack in the attic, and that's how the cat got in. For a while, nothing happens. And then a few days later, we hear in our living room wall, meow, 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 meow. Call the landlord. He comes, breaks the wall. There's another kitten. This time they closed the hole in the roof. Like, okay, they're got no more kittens, right? Then one day, I'm walking into my house, and I hear outside, I hear this little meowing sound. Meow, meow. And I see the mama cat is perched right next to the roof, like on the wall, and is like meowing back. And there's this conversation going on between the mother cat and some muted mewing sounds that are coming from inside the roof. And I'm like, oh my goodness, there's more of them. So I go into the attic with my daughters, and we go crawling around, and we find in the deepest recess of the attic, we find 3 more kittens. Okay? So here I am with 5 kittens and a dog. And I never wanted either one, and I'm allergic to both. Now, I got an allergy test recently, and for dog and cat. So there's such a thing of like immunotherapy. If you're exposed to the allergens, your body can develop an immunity to it. So I became immune to dog and cat allergies from this, but that was a little bit of a tangent. How did I go on a tangent? Oh, so everyone knows dogs are extremely loyal, and cats are very modest, so to speak. The cats, they always go to a private place to do their business. It's always private, somewhere private. Dogs, not so much. But what I was saying is, Abraham, he intuited from the world. He looked at the world, and he said, this world was created by God to reveal his will. He learned the loyalty from the dog and modesty from the cat and different noble traits he learned from nature. He saw emerging from nature these beautiful qualities that he realized are the originating from the Creator. And even he went so far as to develop practices that were completely in tandem and harmony with creation. And as it would turn out, these practices were foreshadowing of the Torah commandments, so that we find Abraham baking matzahs in the month of Nisan, which is when Pesach would take place. We see Abraham observing Sabbath. There's different verses that hint to these observances that were not yet commanded to anyone. And yet we find that Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the forefathers, are observing laws that would only be commanded to their children. So the second development of Avraham was to intuit the will of God that would ultimately be fulfilled in the commandments, and he began fulfilling what would later be commandments before they were commandments. So this way, Abraham's approach to God was an enhancement over that of his Noahide predecessors. Now, I forgot what got us on this tangent, but what I was saying is, okay, I get lost a little bit on my own tangents. So I'll tell you, with the time I have left, I'll tell you something that basically Rashi says. There's a Mishnah in Avos, in Tractate Avos, is known as Pirkei Avos, the chapters of the fathers. There's a Mishnah there in chapter 5, Mishnah 3, that says that Avram was tested with 10 tests. He was tested with 10 tests. It does not tell us what the 10 tests are, although they are recorded in other sources, and there's something of a dispute of what the 10 tests in Avram's life were. And I really wanted to talk more about tests, and we'll see if we have time for it. But, for example, being told to leave his home and travel was a test of his faith. The famine when he arrives in the land of Canaan was a test of his faith. Here, I followed this God all the way here, and there's a famine in the land, right? He could have said, what kind of God is this? Why is he doing this to me? But rather he says, no, I have faith in God. This is everything's meant to be. And he travels to Egypt to find food, and Sarah's abducted, and that was another test of his faith. And then later on, he has to rescue his nephew Lot from these 4 warlords. It's one man against an army. This was a very great test of his faith, and he wins. He's childless for many years. This was a very great test of his faith. He's commanded to circumcise at 99 years of age. Trust me, no easy task. That was a test of his faith. Sarah's again abducted by the king of the Philistines. Abraham has to send away Hagar, his wife, which is very painful for him to do. He had to send away Ishmael, his son, which was very painful for him to do. He had to bind his son Isaac upon an altar with the intent to slaughter him, as he thought he was commanded to do, before God, essentially reverses it. But all of these acts he has to carry out against his grain of being a person of absolute kindness. He has to carry out these acts against his grain and in pure loyalty to God. And I didn't even necessarily name 10 of them, but there, like I said, there's something of dispute of how to count the 10, what the 10 are. So the Mishnah tells us that there were these 10 tests. And I'm trying to remember where I was going with the 10 tests. I got lost on another one of my tangents. Okay, so let me. Hopefully, I'll find where I got lost on the tangent. But rewinding it a little bit. So we see it. Yes, Avram's outreach. we see that his outreach affected his father. His father decided to go to the land of Canaan, maybe to join up with the Noahides over there. He ends up going as far as Haran. He stops, and Avram takes it the rest of the way. So Rashi, this is what I was saying. Rashi comments on sorry for the brain fog. Rashi comments on that Mishnah of, the Mishnah says, Abram was tested with 10 tests, and he passed all of them. And this is to show us, this is to pronounce to us how much, it says, Kama chibaso shel Avraham Avinu alav Hashem. How much was the love of Avraham Avinu for Hashem? We learned the love of Avraham Avinu for Hashem in this, through these 10 tests. That's why the Torah talks about these 10 instances, is to demonstrate how Avram was willing to stand up against these insurmountable tests and yet overcome them, because he was driven by a pure fire for Hashem like no one else before, maybe after. So Rashi says that these 10 tests correspond to the 10 sayings of creation that our sages in the same chapter of Avos tell us that the world was created with 10 pronouncements. When we look at the opening chapter of Genesis, and God says, let there be, and there was. God says, let there be, and there is. God is speaking the world into existence. And our sages count 10 pronouncements that bring the world into existence. So the world is founded upon 10 divine pronouncements. And so the world stands on these 10 pronouncements. And Noah was not able to rescue this world. The world of 10 pronouncements couldn't be rescued by Noah. It was destroyed in a deluge and it had to start over. But we're told there were 10 generations from Adam to Noah, and Noah was that 10th generation. And the significance of the number 10 was that he was the guy that was supposed to save the world, which was represented by the number 10, and corresponds Kabbalistically to the 10 Sephiros. That's another discussion. The 10 Sephiros, which are the divine emanations, which are essentially the same as the divine sayings, that's a whole other Kabbalistic conversation. But he failed, really, that he only managed to save himself and his family. They were righteous, but he didn't succeed in his outreach. So they're called Mei Noach, the waters of Noah. 10 more generations pass, and it's take 2. In Avram's time, the world is not destroyed. And even though Avram doesn't reach everybody, because even all these students that we hear about in chapter 12, the souls that they made, in chapter 14, the students that he takes, his disciples, that he takes into battle, right? What happened to these people? In the end, they also became lost, and their progeny became diluted through history. And only the seed of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the 70 souls that went down to Egypt, the nation that emerged, and so on. Why was Abraham's mission considered a success over that of Noah, that the world was not destroyed in the generation of Abraham? Rashi says that Abraham, with his great love of God, that he was able to pass these 10 tests, which, so to speak, in his merit, the world of 10 was upheld. Rashi said, Avram saved the world with his fire and his zeal and his love for God. He created the foundation that would save the entire world. Such that the 3 great religions, it's funny that they say the 3 great religions are Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And it's like, you know that Jews make up less than 0.5% of the world's population, right? How great could this religion be if so few people follow it? And again, you'll count the Jewish population as what? 12 million, 13 million in the world, right? How many of those people are keeping the Torah? Again, I just say intentionally. There are good people doing a lot of charity and kindness, and all those are included. But intentionally saying, I believe in God, I believe in the Torah, and I'm trying to fulfill his commandments, keeping the Sabbath, keeping kosher, keeping the other commands that Jews are commanded to keep. How many people are intentionally doing that? As far as I know, it's not close to half of the 12 or 13 million Jews. maybe they say the traditional community is, maybe somewhere between 20 and 40%, So for sure, the Orthodox world is not more than 20% of that number. It's growing because the other numbers are assimilating and disappearing, and the Orthodox community is growing. But we went through a lot of persecutions, and we went through a lot of assimilations that keeping us very small, and keeping the people who are loyal to the tradition very few in number. How many people, after all, are intentionally keeping Judaism? Not a whole lot. And yet, it says, we're counted among the great religions. I wonder why that is. It's more of a question than an answer. But Christianity and Islam, for their part, while they do deviate from the original, let's say, and while they do contain heretical ideas from our objective perspective, they do carry on and magnify to a very great degree much of the original core of Abrahamic values, such that they're called the Abrahamic religions. So that means that 2/3 of the world's population are, in a certain way, disciples of Abraham, carrying on an Abrahamic tradition to some degree. And in that, you could even include the secular Jews, because even the secular Jews, they're very, very into philanthropy. They're very, very into humanism. They're very, very into, so to speak, Hillel's adage of, do unto others, etc. There is a great Abrahamic core behind that, which Hillel himself said is really the core of everything. That's the Torah on one foot, is, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And Maimonides says that the spread of Abrahamic ideas, diluted as they are and twisted as they are by false religions, will allow that when the true Mashiach comes, he'll be instantly recognized by everybody, because they've all been studying these concepts. They're all familiar with the concepts that when they see it, they will recognize the genuine article. And the knowledge of God will cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. So Hashem saw in Abraham the seed that would save the entire world. Abraham, through perfecting himself and his mission to God and his love of God and his commitment to God, through these 10 tests, these 10 trials, would uphold the world of 10 by creating an ideology and sustaining an ideology and proliferating an ideology that would infect, ultimately, the population of the world. That one guy who would have such a small nation of his own seed, of his own progeny after him, is one guy would ultimately redeem the entire world. And we're just waiting for that little pin to drop in place, that little keystone to just drop in place and uphold the structure finally. That's all we're waiting for, but the foundations are set. Everything was set into place by Abraham, and that is perhaps why his name is changed in this week's Parsha when he undergoes the circumcision covenant. His name is changed from Avram to Avraham, and the significance of that, aside from God adding a letter of his name, and this is something we've spoken about before, that Avram just means, Rashi says, it's a contraction of the words Av Aram, the father of Aramea. He was an Aramean patriarch. That's all he was. He was a patriarch from Aramea. Avram, Av Aram, the patriarch of Aramea. He says, but Avraham, God says in the verse, Ki Av Hamon Goyim Nisaticha, because I have made you an Av, a father, to Hamon Goyim, to a multitude of nations. Av, the Resh stayed in there. Av, Raham, the Torah says, is the father of multitude of nations, because all of the nations ultimately would be affected and infected by Abraham's love of Hashem, and that great love, demonstrated by his passing of the 10 trials, would bring ultimately the whole world to love and recognition of Hashem. He will be the father of all the nations in a spiritual sense. And that's why the converts are called Ben Abraham, son of Abraham, Ben Sarah, the son of Sarah, or daughter of Abraham, daughter of Sarah. So it's the end of the hour. I had prepared a totally different class, but this is the way it goes with me. And so I'll just say, like Abraham, who taught us to recognize God, to love God, to dedicate ourselves to God, we all can follow in his ways, attach ourselves to him, love him. And I'll just say one more thing. Our rabbis tell us that there's a commandment, you should love Hashem your God. Jews recite it twice a day. It's part of the Shema. There's the Ahavta as Hashem Elokecha. You may love Hashem your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your means. What does it mean to love God? It means many things. But one of the meanings, and this is the one Abraham surely fulfilled, loving God means to make God beloved to others. If we live a life that people look at us and say, wow, that person is a servant of the Most High God, that's the type of person I want to be. That's the type of God I want to attach myself to. Making God beloved unto others. That's what we learn from Avram. And if we take that lesson and we carry it forward into our own lives, we will, with Hashem's help, bring the world to its final redemption, to the final fulfillment of the vision of this great patriarch of Avram. And in that way, we'll all merit to be children of Avram and see the true Mashiach speedily in our days.
And that is a good wrap. Rabbi, thank you for your time. It's been awesome, as usual. Guys, if you need to, if you can't find, some people are commenting they're not getting alerted on YouTube when I actually go live. And pretty much every channel on YouTube has 3 options when you turn on notifications. You have to make sure you select all, otherwise you may only get 1 or 2 things popping up. So, yep, subscribe, turn on notifications, all of them, and then be sure to share it with your friends. This is good stuff. Weekly Parsha, Rabbi. It's been amazing, as usual, and we thank you for your time. Peace out, everybody, and we'll see you same time, same place, Hashem willing, next week. Thanks.
Shalom, my dear friends. Hope this message finds you well. If you like the way this channel is going, and the channel has been a blessing to you, please consider supporting the channel by going to the website, TanachTalk.com, TanachTalk.com. Thank you once again for your time and for supporting Tanakh Talk. Shalom.